Right. Oops. Okay. All right. So this week we're going to be spending a majority of our time talking about the construction process for houses. Okay. In every sense, this dovetails beautifully to a couple conversations that we had in GCOM 402. Okay. So it's a continuation of those ideas. In addition, we're also going to get our hands dirty with some Unity today. We're going to open up Unity for our first time and start throwing some assets in there and starting to understand that pipeline with a little bit more detail. I'm a big believer, and I advocate the idea of including your game engine as early into the development of these art assets as you can, because you want to test things out, you want to check to make sure everything is going to work in the environment that these assets are going to end up in, right? Modo is just the authoring environment, right? It's not the development environment that our games are going to be created within. So today is all about Unity, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about some modeling of houses as well. And I actually need to take a step back because there's actually three things that we're going to talk about. So we're going to do Unity first, okay? Then we're going to piggyback off of our conversation last week, right? What we talked about last week? Bump maps. Thank you. Thank you. I had a moment of panic there where seemingly everyone forgot what we talked about. No, yeah, we talked about bump map last week's, right? This idea of creating relief, surface relief across our models is incredibly important. Today, we're going to talk about how we take those bump maps and really get them into what a game engine requires, also known as a normal map. There are a lot of different ways to make normal maps. Shoot, even Unity will do it for you, but the results are going to be kind of meh. They're not hot. So we're really going to be looking at how we can extract this height information from our models in Modo, generate normal maps, so that we can use them inside of Unity. Okay? So we're going to talk about Unity. We'll talk about how to create normal maps, and then we'll talk about some modeling techniques for our houses. Okay? Sound good? As you can see, this week's homework assignment is going to be a big one. This is going to be a two-part assignment. This week, we're going to focus exclusively on the geometry for our blacksmith shop. Now, once again, you're free to use, and I encourage you to go out and do other styles. You don't have to do this old English style that I've been doing the entire semester. But it's a good place to start because there's a lot of reference out there, right? It's very easy to find some photographs and some blueprints of blacksmith shops and buildings from that era. However, if you want to do something different, I say thumbs up, man. I'm never going to pull back on your creativity. I'm never going to pull you back in and say, no, that's not a direction we're going to go in. You're more than welcome to do any type of art style that you want. So we're going to focus on the geometry this week, and we have to look at how we get to that geometry in an efficient way. How we build buildings, or how we create buildings for a 3D game engine is a little bit differently, and the approach is a little bit different from that of the feature film pipeline. So we're going to be kind of ironing out those differences today and zeroing in on how we get to construct things for our game authoring environment. Again, much like we did in 402, this idea of scale really plays a big role. Okay? And you're going to find pretty quickly that the scale units inside of Modo, where we create these elements, are going to be different from what Unity interprets. So we're going to zero in on those, talk about those ideas in detail. And then next week, we're going to finish this blacksmith shop and ultimately put all of our textures on it next week. And as one might imagine, for an environment like this, or excuse me, for a model like this, we're not going to be leveraging the power of Photoshop in most areas with this blacksmith shop, right? Because all of our textures would look pretty poor. You'll see this here in a second. That's actually my model up there in the banner image, okay? And you'll see, once we start talking about UV maps next week, how many individual UVs that we're going to be working with just for this one house. So the Photoshop texturing pipeline is not going to be really, it's not going to give us the best results for a big object like a house. So next week, we're going to spend almost all of our time talking about the tiling texture process. You need to make some decisions on this project. I want you guys to start thinking about it, intensely today. Because in every sense, you're going to build upon this idea for your final project, okay? We're not too far away from the pre-production phase of your final project in this class, okay? I know firsthand how long it takes to build these models, to do the UV, to do the texturing, and then to do all the development inside of Unity. It's not something that you can just kind of pop out in a week. your final project, I'm going to give you guys about a month to work on your final project. And you're going to be turning in little production milestones, and you're going to be turning in these little updates every single week, starting about, week 12. We're on week 9, okay? So we're really not that far off. This blacksmith shop, my big picture, my goal is for you to include this blacksmith shop in the little level that you're going to build for your final project, okay? So start thinking about what that level is going to look like now, okay? All of the art assets that we've created in this class are geared and intelligently designed to give you a library of assets to populate your environment for your final project, okay? This is one of them. This is one of them. I can't believe it's already week 9. It's blowing my mind a little bit. This semester is kind of like flying right by. It really is. Excuse me, say again? How much do we have coming this semester anyway? Yeah, so the end of the semester, I'm so very, very thankful that the end of the semester, I think is actually December 18th, when the new Star Wars film comes out. I believe that's the last day of this semester. I'm really, really quite thankful. It's either, I can't remember off the top of my head if we end on a Wednesday or a Thursday. But it's right around mid-December. If you look at the academic calendar here, actually, let's look. Now I'm curious. It's all your fault, Tyler. Okay, sec.losfrios.edu, and I believe over here in the left nav bar, here we go, academic calendar, fall, December 17th. Yes, the day before Star Wars comes out. That makes me very, very happy. So. That's the mark that we're shooting towards, okay? Things are going to wrap up quickly, as they always do in the fall semester, because once we get back from our Thanksgiving recess, it's seemingly a blur. Bloop, 2 weeks go by like that, and we're done, okay? Our Thanksgiving break, as you can see, it's the last week of November. So when we come back, we only have basically 2 weeks, and then we're done with the academic calendar for this semester, okay? So the month of November is going to be an important one for us through the lens of creating the assets for our final project, okay? All right, let's jump in and start talking about how we're going to work inside of Unity. Questions on this before we go any further? Rock and roll. So I've brought some stuff with me. I actually brought a lot of stuff with me today that will help us kind of explore and understand the pipeline. And this is where the challenge of working inside of the 3D art industry for the game world really presents itself, is that we now have to export all of our finished work from Modo into a file format and into a texture system that can be imported into Unity easily. It's not difficult, it really isn't, but it's not the easiest thing either. And we have to be disciplined, and we have to have a very high degree of attention to detail here to ensure that everything is getting transferred correctly. This is a big challenge for everyone in the computer graphics industry, so let's kind of look. So I brought in my little wood crate. You've seen this one before. I've also brought in a couple textures with it. We'll put these back on the model in Modo here in a second and really examine and understand the process that we need to go through. Let's just do it. If I'm going to turn the lights off, be a little bit easier to see everything in the wonderfully dark environment of Modo. And man, it's taken a long time to open today. That's interesting. Okay. Let me just relink my texture real fast. Here we go, and here is my crate. Let me turn off my grid so it's a little bit easier to see, okay? Now, right now, if you look very carefully at this asset, it's pretty basic. There's not a whole lot going on. There's very few polygons. They're all quads. 78 polygons, that's appropriate for a cube of this detail. I could make it smaller if I really wanted to, but I think for today, this is a pretty good starting point. However, if you continue to examine the contents of my item list, this is where we need to be a little bit more focused, okay? We're never ever going to export all of the items inside of our item list. We don't want to do that, right? What do you think are the only items that we want to leave Modo as we go into Unity? What do we want to leave? Or what do we want to have leave the system? Geometry and UV maps. Bingo, just the geo and just the UV maps, okay? Luckily for us, in addition to that, what's also going to be exported are the connections, the relationships between the polygons and the materials that we create. So there is some setup in here that we need to do as we begin to export all this jazz. But we just want the geometry to go and its related pieces, being the UV maps, the materials, and the textures. That's it. I want to ensure that I don't send the light, the camera, the texture locators. I don't want any of that jazz to go. I just want the mesh item and its related pieces. And specifically, if you look carefully, I have two mesh items here. I have create low and then create high. I want to send, obviously, just create low. This one's going to serve a purpose here in a minute, and we'll come back to that. But this is the asset that I want to leave Modo and import into Unity. There's a couple things in here that we need to do. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the center point for this asset is precisely where we want it to be. Now think about this here for a second. Where should the center point for my crate be? On the bottom? Sure, absolutely. Where's the default location for all center points for every mesh item inside of Modo? Where? Which is also called? The origin, right? The origin absolutely is going to be the center point location, or the default center point location for all mesh items. Now you have to, at the very least, be aware of where all of your center points are. Let's just do it real fast. If I go up to the top of the screen and enter into all of my selection sets, under the items section here, if you left click and hold, we'd actually go in and select some center points. And once you do that, keyboard shortcut number 7, and that's the number 7 on the top row of your keyboard, you can see that here in the modeling layout, that center point spindle has been displayed for us. Let me turn on my grid, just so we can get a really good understanding of the location of the center point in relationship to that grid. Okay? Now, is this a good place, a good placement for the center point right now? It's not a bad place for it, right? Because the center point's at the origin, and then our object, the polygons for my crate, are also centered around the origin, so that's not a bad idea, okay? But let's project ourselves into the game authoring environment, okay? When we place this object in Unity, is it going to be in the ground? Yeah, it absolutely is. So maybe it'd be better if we were to place this object, or have the center point, have the center point where it is, but the polygons be raised up a little bit, so we get the illusion that the bottom of the crate and the bottom of the center point are in the exact same spot, right? That way, we can very quickly stack these crates on top of each other. We can place them on top of other items quickly. It's not a bad production practice. Now, so I need to raise up the polygons on this mesh item to the center of the y-axis. Give me a couple production techniques that will allow me to do that quickly. Yeah, that's not going to work, right? Because it's already centered at the origin. It's in these polygons that constitute my crate are already centered at the y origin, right? I don't want them centered. I want them offset a little bit. Whoa, yes, that would actually work. That would actually work, but we're way over engineering. That's way too much math and way too much thinking, okay? I would suggest using your snapping grid, okay? Check this action out. This is pretty cool. I'm going to look at my scene from the front. And from the front, you can very easily see the center of the y-axis right there. So I'm going to grab all these polygons, fire off, or enable my global snapping system. And let's look at the snapping options before we go too much further, because I think what we're going to want to do, we're going to want to maybe snap to vertexes, okay? I also want to snap to the grid. So let's do that as well, okay? Now, if I fire off the Move tool, and note that my action center is set to none at the moment, I get to put the action handles for my Move indicator, for my Move tool anywhere that I want. This is why I had that vertex snapping on, so that I can snap my Move handles to the bottommost vertice on that object. With that done, I can really use the power of that grid snapping engine that we also enabled a minute ago, and move this up with accuracy. See how it snaps to the grid lines? Boop, done. Drop the tool, turn off snapping, and I'm on my way, okay? This snapping engine is wickedly powerful. It allows us to very, very quickly snap multiple items to other items quickly inside of our scene. For me, this is one of the reasons I find Modo to be really special. is that they thought through how we as 3D artists want to snap to things inside of our three-dimensional scenes. It's quite good. All right. Does anyone remember the global keyboard shortcut to enable and disable the snapping engine? X. You got it. Okay, let me turn it off, and we're good to go. So we've positioned this crate where we want it to reside and how we want it to be placed inside of our Unity game world. Now we need to go in and just look at the shader tree. In addition to all the geometry leaving Modo, we're also going to send the UV maps, and we're going to export all of the materials as well. And this is actually really important because a lot of folks, they forget about the materials. We can't forget about them, okay? We need to go in and triple check, ensure that we've cleaned up our shader tree and we've named everything correctly, because these materials are going to come along for the ride. And Unity is a little unforgiving when it comes to managing these materials, okay? So it's important that we're clear, we're concise, and that you have a very direct understanding of the role of each one of these materials. Now, luckily for me, I only have one material group inside of my entire shader tree. It's called crate, which is perfect, okay? But in other situations, project yourself into next week, okay? When we start putting all the textures on our blacksmith shop, you're going to have 8 or 9 material groups. So you want to make sure you name them correctly, okay? Now, we just need to focus on the name of the material group itself, okay? This element in here, don't care about. And this texture, I don't care about either. It's just the group that's going to be saved and exported as we go over into Unity. Okay. In every sense, this material is now going to become the filter for the game engine rendering pipeline. That material is going to help Unity understand which polygons the texture needs to be applied to. Okay. Unity and most game engines are a very material-focused rendering environment. Okay. I think Modo is kind of the opposite. It's more of an item-based rendering environment, and the material kind of filters what goes on each one of those items. It's not the same over inside of Unity, but it is pretty powerful. I think once you get a little bit more accustomed to it, you'll start to understand it. All right. We ready to do this? We ready to export out all this jazz? Okay. So here's how I would like you to do it. It's really easy. Go back to the item list and physically select in the item list the mesh item that you want to export from Modo and to import into Unity. Of course, it's going to be the crate low, and there's a magical keyboard shortcut, but a magical command buried inside of your right-click contextual menu. You right-click on it, and it is Export Selected Layers. Okay. Now I only have one layer selected, so just that mesh item is going to be leaving here. I'll hit OK, and I'll get this popover. Now this next bit is actually really important because this is going to make or break the new file that's generated when I hit OK here in a second. So we need to define pretty quickly what types of file formats Unity is going to accept inside of its rendering and development platform. Okay? Does anyone have an idea? There's a whole bunch of them in that format pull-down menu. There we go. Wow. Which one of these, or which combination of these can we use? Well, there's basically 3 that you want to experiment. Again, this is another reason why I encourage folks to get things into Unity as quickly as they can to ensure that what they're generating in their authoring app, in our case Modo, integrates cleanly into the rendering pipeline over in Unity, right? There's 3 that I encourage folks to look at, and I apologize the lights are off. Okay, so let me just write these on the board. So we want to look at the Collada file. Collada, FBX, and OBJ, or away from the object file. Those are the 3 that I focus all of my energy on. And there's reasons for this, okay? The Collada 1.4.1 is a great file format because it's an open-sourced file format that's widely accepted and used in a lot of different applications, including Unity. And I like working with open-source technology. Modo has very strong first-party support for the Collada file format, and it's pretty fantastic, okay? I always try that one first. If that doesn't work, or if I'm not getting the best results, the next one, and probably the most powerful one in the mix, is the FBX file format. FBX stands for Film Box. It came from another application long ago in a galaxy far, far away. Autodesk is like the evil empire, right? They're like the Borg, right? They just, they assimilate. Resistance is futile, right? They just gobble up these companies, incorporate their technology into the suite of applications that they present. So the FBX file format is awesome. It's really kind of great. Okay, here it is, Autodesk FBX 2013. This is a really strong file format. You're going to see this all over the place. If you start working and integrating it into the Autodesk pipeline, the FBX file format becomes a major player. Okay, it's one that we can't ignore. And there's some awesomeness associated with FBX, right? We can save animation inside of FBX. We can send our cameras and our lights. It's a much larger container for items to be traveling into. However, at times, this can cause some problems. One of the issues that you'll see with the FBX file format is that every year Autodesk updates that file specification, and they make changes to it. And there's massive compatibility issues within each one of those annual updates. We're working with one of the more stronger versions of the FBX file format, which is 2013. There are more recent ones out there. I think, if I remember correctly, there's actually a 2015 version of the file format that has more bells and whistles associated with it. It's a pretty great file format, but at times it can present some issues, okay? I like the FBX file format. I really do. There's actually a really great app called FBX Viewer that it's basically a miniature game engine and whose sole focus is just to view FBX files. It's great. It's a pretty cool application. All it does is it opens up the model, you can spin it around, change the lighting, and that's basically it, just to look at the actual model. So the FBX is pretty cool. I liked it a lot. So we're kind of going through a process of elimination here. If Collada doesn't work, try FBX. And these are interchangeable. You're more than welcome and encouraged to do FBX first. And if that doesn't give you the result, go Collada. That should work, okay? And if those don't work, pop out an object file, a wavefront OBJ, okay? This is the oldest file format in our industry. It's been around since the beginning, okay? It's called wavefront because that was the crew that developed this file format way back in the 80s. Believe it or not, Wavefront is actually the original developer of Maya, okay, which is pretty neat. They created this file format. It's the most widely supported file format on the face of the planet. If you're trying to, for whatever reason, if you're trying to do 3D stuff inside of Photoshop, what's the file format that they demand? OBJ. It's the only file format that they support. The object file is basically supported by everyone. It's kind of our industry standard. It's the least common denominator, but it's also the most simple file format out there. What it's going to export is just the geometry and the basic material connections, okay? It's the most simple file format. It doesn't come with all the bells and whistles of the FBX file format, but it's bulletproof, okay? If you need to just export your geometry, OBJ is your guy. It's pretty strong. Let's pick an FBX file format here real fast. Okay, so once you've chosen your format, now you have three options that you need to look at, okay? And of course, we're not going to do export all layers because that would include the high-resolution version of my crate, the camera, the lights, everything that's currently residing inside of my item list. I don't want that. Now, we don't want separate files. If you had, well, in our case, we just want one file, right? One for my crate. But let's pretend that you had like crate low selected and crate high selected. You'd pop out two different versions or two different files with separate files enabled. Now the last one is actually really important. We want to enable just layers because this is going to export just the selected item in the item list. It's going to ignore the camera. It's going to ignore the lights and the scenes. It's just going to export whatever we had selected, and it ensures that nothing else is saved inside of this FBX file format. The FBX file format wants to put basically everything, your entire scene, in a cross-platform application or a cross-platform file format, okay? So just layers ensures that only the selected item is going to be saved. It's kind of our insurance policy, especially when working with FBX. Okay, so hit the OK button. You'll get your standard OS dialog box. And I'm just going to place this guy on my desk. And here's my suggestion to you. If you look at my naming convention here, would create version 1 _ Unity. This is how I do it. So I know that this is the physical file that I want to go to Unity. If you look at the way I've named, I don't have any other version of this file. But on my desktop, on my laptop, I have would create version 001. Actually, I think I have version 2 and 3. But the one that I append with Unity tells me this is the file that I sent to Unity. Okay? I like that. It makes it really easy to understand all this, to understand the role of this file inside of your larger media management system. So give it a good name, good location. I'm going to save mine to the desktop. You get this a lot. It says saving a non-LXL format may resort in data loss if the format does not support all scene elements. What would you like me to do? Well, hit save. That's basically the Foundry saying it's not our fault if something gets screwed up because you're saving it in a piece of software that doesn't belong to us, right? All right, let's look at what was created. And there it is. There's the FBX file format. Okay, there it is, .fbx. Let me save out a collada file as well because I want to show you this. This is actually kind of cool. It kind of illustrates the open sourceness, if that's a word, of the export selected layers. We'll do collada this time. Collada is supported everywhere. I'm going to leave it the exact same name. The extension for a collada file is .dae. I think this is actually kind of cool. So there it is. Here's my collada file. If you were to open this up in preview, which is the default application here on the Mac for viewing DAEs, you can actually look at it, which is pretty cool. It's not a great viewer, but it's kind of proof that this file format has a much larger role inside of our 3D industry. It is an open source file format that a lot of folks can tap into. All right. Questions on that process? It's really easy. Just right-click on the item in the item list. Export selected layers. Start with FBX because it's going to give you the most robust feature set. And then just ensure that just layers is enabled to only export the mesh item from your item list here in Modo. Okay? If you're disciplined, if you follow that sequence, you shouldn't have any problem getting all your stuff to leave cleanly from Modo. Okay? This is absolutely one of those moments where only you can prevent forest fires. Okay? Let's jump over into Unity now and start looking at how we're going to work in that environment. So now that we have some assets, we can start playing. How many of you guys have worked with Unity before in the past? A little bit. Okay, start working with Unity. This is going to be the game engine that we're going to be working with for the rest of the semester. So basically every week, starting right now, we're going to be in Unity every single week. Okay? You can download it. There is a free version that's absolutely 100% free. No conditions associated with it. It's pretty fantastic. If you go to unity3d.com, you can very, very quickly find the most recent version of Unity. We're working with version 5, the latest and the greatest. It's pretty fantastic. I'm a big fan of the Unity game engine as a development platform. You can create some really stunning results. And a lot of independent game developers are flocking towards Unity because of their because of the tool set and how user-centric their tool set are. In addition, the licensing platform and the licensing scheme is also very, very strong. I'll let you kind of look in at some of the details when you're ready. But you can create, in my opinion, you can create any game that you want with the free version. Okay. Spending $1,500 on the pro version of the software will unlock some pro-level features, but you can author a game with the free version. Okay. I know a lot of people that have done that, which is pretty cool. It's very cool. And this is the cool thing about working with Unity. If you go into the Get Unity section, they'll show you a breakdown. So these are the things that you get with the Pro. And there's some Pro level ideas in here that you really want to take advantage of. For $1,500, you get a lot of good stuff. Okay, and However, you can also rent the Pro version on a month-by-month basis, and that's what I recommend that people do. It's like, do whatever you need to do. You can build your game. You can get basically down to like the 5-yard line, okay, with the free version, and then rent the Pro version for a couple months, publish your game, you're done, okay? It's awesome. It's really, really cool. They have made their system very approachable for independent game developers. They have. It's a fantastic platform. I love it. It's Mac and PC. It's fantastic. There's also a number of modules that you can continue to add on to it. Let's see. I'm not maybe some more features. Nope. I don't know where they've hidden it. But there's also an iOS version. It's in here somewhere. I don't know where it is right now. But there's some modules that you can add on to continue extending the power of Unity. So if you wanted to use Unity as your game pipeline for like an Xbox One game or a PS4, you can buy that module. Or I think for the consoles, it's included in the free. So I think it's just the mobile crowd that requires an extra module, and it's not too expensive. It's not free, or the Pro version isn't free, but you can do some pretty amazing things. If you're playing a mobile game, chances are it's made in Unity. That's really kind of put Unity on the map, as it dominated the mobile market about 5 years ago. And now they've increased the quality of their rendering engine to compete. They're beginning to compete with the Unreal game engine, which is also another powerful, powerful feature set, or has another powerful feature set. Okay, download it, get it. It's free. It doesn't cost you a single thing. It's pretty fantastic, okay? There's no reason you shouldn't get the free version of Unity. Download it at home, work on your games at home. You can bring them here and continue working on them. It's a very easy transition between different computers, okay? One of the reasons I initially chose Unity is because of the power of that free version. You guys have access to this software. You have the exact same access to this software. We're working with the free version here on campus. This isn't anything special, okay? I have no idea what this education thing is. Cool. I'll have to check that out. Pretty neat. Okay. Anyways, let's go ahead and launch Unity. And this is something that you'll definitely want to play along with. Okay. Here's the Unity icon. It's sitting down in your dock. Now, when you launch Unity, it's going to pop up with this wizard. Okay. Here we go. 5.1.2, okay, let's work offline. All right, so this is where we're going to start. We're going to create a project. Now, inside of the Unity workflow, there are some hierarchical and organizational things that we need to be very much aware of, okay? Our game is a project, okay? That's the topmost root directory in your folder system. That project file, every single element that's included and that will work in your game is going to be in that project file. So let's create a new project. And I'm going to place this on my desktop. And we'll call this Pat's Crate game. Okay? And please, 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 please be aware of where you're saving this folder. This is critical, okay? Literally every single element that is responsible for generating the game and the interactivity moments in your game are going to be in one folder, okay? And so you need to be aware of what that folder is, or where that folder is, excuse me. In addition, we can also make 3D games, or we can make classic 2D games. You can change this after the fact, but we're going to be making 3D games in here, so we're going to leave that option as defaults. This asset packages, this is also something that you can import in after the fact. Let's just add one though. These asset packages come with Unity. You should have them on your desktop, and I think I'm going to do, let's do cameras. I think that's the only one that I need. There we go, and hit done. These packages are little bundles of code, objects, prefabs that will automatically be loaded and inserted into your game environment when you create the game itself, okay? However, these things can be imported in after. So if you don't import in now, that's fine. You always have access to them, so it's not a one-time deal. Okay, let's go ahead and create the project. And Unity is going to take over for a second. It's going to launch and then start installing a lot of different things. So at times, you can see it decompressing. Just let it cook. Don't do anything. Okay, just let it kind of do its thing for a second. This is the first time I've launched Unity. Here we go. Wonderful. There's the new version. Currently installed 5.1 to F1. Oh, okay, so I'll have to update this. That's fine. We'll do, I won't do this at the moment. All right. So welcome to Unity. Before we jump into here, let's talk about what the computer has done for us and what it's created on our desktop. Because there's the project directory, Pat's Crate Game. Okay, this is it. This is the project file. Everything in our game is sitting in one folder on your desktop. When you leave today and you take your files home or over into the design lab, this is the folder that needs to come along for the ride. Okay. Now in your mind, you're basically having two levels, two folder structures inside of your media management system. Okay. And let me just kind of illustrate this. I'm going to make a new folder from the selection. Okay. So if you look at what I have here, I have two folders on my desktop. These, the one that I have selected, these are all the raw art assets. These are all the original source files that create the assets that go into my game. You don't want to confuse these, okay? You don't want to cross-pollinate, okay? You want to have all of your raw stuff separate from your game. If you start placing all of your raw assets in the exact same folder as all your game project files, the game is going to get real bloated, that project file is going to get ginormous, and you're going to lose some performance in the authoring environment, okay? And organizationally, it makes sense to separate out all of the raw game stuff from all your raw assets, okay? This is a folder that many people will be working on inside of the game production pipeline. Because remember, you're not the only person on a big game. You're not the only person that's working off of your project directory, right? You're going to have a whole team of people making animations, making models, making interface elements. Of course, you're going to have an army of programmers that are going to be responsible for generating the interactivity. A lot of guys and gals are going to be accessing the folder that I have selected. Now, you guys are the 3D modelers in this class, so you need to work exclusively just on your raw stuff, and that's something that I don't want a programmer touching and interfacing with. So it makes sense, and it's a good practice to separate the two. That way, nothing accidentally happens to either of them, right? Because if you accidentally delete something inside your project directory, you run the risk of your game just fundamentally not working. Let's look at the project directory here real fast and see precisely what the computer has done. Because it's created a whole series of folders, a whole series of subfolders in this master project directory. So these are the 4 subfolders that will be created with every Unity project. You have the assets folder, the library, project settings, and then the temp. You need all 4 of these folders, okay? The only folder that you're allowed to really touch is the assets folder. That's it. The other 3, just ignore that they're there. Unity is creating this whole back end, this whole database, and is placing information and managing the information in those other 3 folders automatically for you behind the scenes. We do not want to interfere with that. Monkeying around with the library folder, project settings, and temp, you run the risk of your game breaking pretty quickly. You'll need all 4 of these folders, okay? When you're at the end of the day, when you leave, you should just be able to take your root folder, Pat's Crate Game, that one, and drag it onto your thumb drive or upload it to the web, okay? Don't individually manage those 4. Just manage the root, the project directory. All right, does that make sense? Okay. Let's jump over into Unity here real fast and talk about this development environment. Now, if you've launched Unity, actually, you may have a different view. I've customized mine, so let me see if I can reset my layout here. There we go. So this is what your interface is going to look like, okay? So welcome to Unity. It's a pretty cool environment. It's actually a whole lot of fun, and it's a very powerful authoring environment inside of the game engine pipeline, okay? There are a couple windows in here that we need to be very, very aware of. Of course, in the center of our interface, we have our OpenGL viewport. This is very, very similar to that of the OpenGL viewport that we're used to interacting with over inside of Modo, but it's on steroids. It actually does a whole lot more than meets the eye. It's what you see is almost always what you get, okay? Unity is very WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, okay? If it looks broken inside of your scene view, chances are it's the asset's broken. Something's not working, okay? We don't have to render everything inside of a game world. Everything's real-time rendering, which is awesome, right? Because what we see is what we get. It's what the computer's actually going to draw. With that said, there are some post-processing effects that we can ask Unity to do that we'll only really see once we hit that play button and physically jump into our simulation and start playing our game. With that said, if you look in this center viewport, of course we have our Scene tab, but we also have our Game tab. So the Scene tab is our work environment. Our Game tab is what's going to take over, basically, when we start physically playing the game. So in every sense, what is in the Game tab is what our users, our gamers, are going to be interacting with. It is the game running, okay? This Game tab is only going to become active, and it's only going to be brought to the foreground of our workflow when we hit that big play button in the center of the application. So you have play, pause, and then, what is it, fast forward. I never really used that last one, but I'm sure it has a function. Let's see what it is. I don't know. So play. So now I'm physically playing the game. Now I'm stopping the game. Okay? We'll come back to that here in a minute. So the center area is where we're going to be doing our work and also where we're going to be previewing and playing our game in Unity. The next big part of our Unity interface is the Project tab down here. In every sense, this Project tab is our asset library. This is our global bin. This is where we're going to be able to import models, animation, textures, sound effects, any number of things, and then apply them to any number of our scenes inside of Unity. So this is going to be our bin, our asset directory. Okay? We're going to be working inside of this environment a lot. This environment is global. I mentioned earlier that inside of Unity, we work off of a very interesting idea, right? Your project is your game, right? Is equal to your game, to the game, okay? But your scene is like what? Anyone want to take a stab at it? If project is to game, what is scene to? What? Yes, bingo, level, right? So the assets that we find in our project tab are basically assets that we can put in any level that we want, okay? If you play your favorite game, you'll see common elements in every single scene, right? Or in certain scenes, right? You know, trash cans are a great example, right? You don't have a custom trash can for every single level. Sometimes maybe there's only 2 trash cans that you see in these first-player shooter games, right? So the assets that we import into our system, they're globally available to us. Let's do that real fast. Let's import in an asset and start playing around with it, okay? Importing assets into Unity is wicked easy. It's pretty cool. Has anyone discovered, if you're following along, how to do it? You could drag and drop. That's a great way of working, okay? You got it. I'm down here in my project window. So if I right-click, import new asset, okay? In addition, if you go to the top of the screen where it says Assets, we have the exact same right-click contextual menu, just in a pull-down menu, so we can also import an asset through there. I'm going to go find my desktop. I'm going to go into my Create Project directory. So these are all my raws. Here's my FBX file. Let's import that bad boy in. Ta-da! Okay. Let's talk about for a second what has physically happened inside of this import procedure. If you look down here in your project directory, we're in the Assets folder, and there it is. There's the wooden crate itself. Now, whenever you have this little arrow, that means there's other subcomponents that are associated with that raw file. Inside of Unity, we are importing a hierarchy of items into our scene. Let me illustrate this a little bit more directly. We're no longer working with a model inside of Unity. The nomenclature and the vocabulary that Unity uses is very, very specific. And it takes a little bit of reprogramming. Because over in Modo, you just had your model. And it's called a mesh item, right? Or maybe you had multiple mesh items. Well, we're no longer working inside that workflow. Inside of Unity, we're working with game objects. Okay? Game objects. And game objects are really a collection of a whole series of component pieces. In the modeling workflow, we have a similar structure. We had the mesh item, which was a container, right? And then we put a whole bunch of stuff inside that container. We put a whole bunch of component pieces, right? We put some polygons, vertices, and edges. Some materials were associated with that container. But really, it was a whole collection of things that turned into the item itself. We're fundamentally doing the exact same thing with game objects, okay? Game objects are a collection of a whole bunch of components, okay? And you'll see those component pieces. Wait, click on that arrow, okay? Now, I want you to look very carefully at what is physically connected as a component piece to my wood crate, okay? Look at the names of everything in here, and you'll start to understand exactly how things are translating from Modo into Unity. So we have the wood crate game object. It's the root. It's the parent, okay? And it has, in this case, it has three children. It has crate dash low, and then it has take one, and then what's that? It says, and then it says, that's actually an avatar over there. That's the wooden crate. I won't type it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay. These are all components. They're children of the game object. Okay. Let's focus on the first one, the first child. Crate low. Does that name ring a bell to anyone? Bingo. We've now transferred over the actual mesh item itself. Okay. Let's go back over into Modo real fast. I think I still have that project file still open, and this is the name of the actual piece of geometry that I exported from Modo, right? Bam, there it is, crate low. So the physical naming characteristics have been transferred from Modo into Unity, which is very cool. It makes it easy for me to understand exactly which ones I'm working with. Let's go back over into Unity real fast. So this one is important, because in every sense, this is our geometry. If we click on it, you'll get a cool little preview over here inside your inspector. Things are looking great. However, it looks a little bit different, doesn't it? There's no texture on it, so it looks very different. We'll talk about that texture here in a minute. But just look at the geometry, because this component piece is just geometry, okay? I heard it. What's the big difference here? Yeah, it's been triangulated automatically. Unity is going to do this. Another reason why we want to work in quad polygons for as much as we can, right? Triangles and quads, those are the two surface types that we exclusively work within. Unity is going to intercept any sort of quad polygon and triangulate it. It's just going to make a diagonal line right down the center, right? That's how we triangulate things in the computer. We can turn any four-sided surface into two triangles, okay? An existing triangle will be ignored, and it won't be additionally, double triangulated, if that makes any sense, okay? It's going to do this automatically. We want it to do it automatically. Our graphics cards only exclusively understand triangles, believe it or not. Our graphics cards, everything at the end of the day gets translated into a language that our graphics cards can understand, and that language is triangles, believe it or not, okay? We work in quad polygons because our tools work better, the workflow is stronger, it gives us more options, and it's cross-platform between multiple applications. But at the end of the day, our graphics cards are going to render triangles, okay? All right, so we want to leave the mesh item, this piece of geometry as is. We don't want to mess with that one. But the other two, we want to kind of strip out and remove. Because this game object, at the end of the day, I just want it to be a mesh, okay? It doesn't have any animation on it, and I don't need a character rig, an avatar, as it's called here in Unity, to drive the movement of this static game object, okay? So we can remove things upon import, and we should remove things upon import. To do that, let's return to the root of this hierarchy, which is this game object here. Okay? With it selected, the inspector over here on the right side of our interface starts to display some information that's actually really kind of important for us. Okay? We want to look at scale factor is going to be one that's important. We're going to talk about that not next week, but the week after. Okay? When we are all the import options. So there's some things in here that we'll definitely want to look at. Scale factor is going to be one that's important. We're going to talk about that not next week, but the week after. Okay? When we start importing in multiple assets into Unity, understanding the size and how the import scale factor determines that size inside of our editor is really important. Okay? So we'll talk about that. There's some other things in here, but you can start to understand that these are all the import channels and options that will allow us to control how the object is going to be worked with. But I think most importantly, let's go into rig. This is that avatar and animation. Okay, I don't want any animation. Let's hit apply, because it doesn't have any animation. And so under rig and animation, I just turn all of that off, because this object doesn't have any animation in the actual file format. And I don't want these. Let's do, for the animation type, let's just put none and hit apply. So under rig and animation, I just turn all of that off, because this object doesn't have any animation in the actual file format. And I don't want these additional game components interfering with the future development of this asset in my game. In all honesty, they just kind of get in the way. If you don't need them, let's get rid of them upon import. It makes our lives a whole lot easier down the line. Okay? Clearly, if your asset is coming in with an animation, then you're going to want to leave all that on. All right. So with that said, now if you look at the hierarchy that this game object is working within, it's just a piece of geometry, which is what we want. Okay. Questions so far? Rock and roll. Okay. So when we imported this asset in, two things were created inside of the project tab down here. We were just talking about the first one, which is the wooden crate, the actual game object. But check it out. We also have our materials as well. This folder was automatically created by Unity. Okay? We want Unity to manage this folder. Now what it's doing, and let's explore that folder by just double clicking on it. There we go. What it has done is it's created a material. Now this is kind of frustrating, isn't it? If you look at the name of this material, it just says no name. This is not good. I don't like this at all, right? This is actually a tremendous problem for me, because now I don't have any sort of visual understanding of what object this material is connected to, right? Let's pretend I have like a wine barrel, a crate, a house, a dumpster, all imported in. Well, which material is connected and related to that object, okay? We shouldn't rely upon any sort of visible connection. We should be able to look at it in list view and understand its role, okay? This is a big-time problem for me. Let's return to the asset directory and look at the import properties of our game object itself. And down here at the bottom, there we go, we have some options in here that are important to look at. See the materials section? We have import materials. That's turned on. Awesome, because we want to bring the materials in. But now the material naming and the material search play a much larger role. Okay, oops, excuse me, apologize. So I've returned to my asset directory, okay? I've selected the game object, the wooden crate game object, and in the inspector is showing us all of the import properties, okay? And if you look down at the very bottom, you can see that no name is actually associated with this model, but I don't want it to be called no name. And let's see if we can force Unity to change the way that it's naming all of its materials. And there it is, material naming by base texture name. Okay, so we have some options in here. And this is going to influence how all of these materials are created. So we have by base texture name from models material. That might be the one we want, right? And then we have model name plus model material. Let's explore number 2 and number 3 here. Now, whenever you make a change, just make sure you hit the apply button, because you really haven't done anything until you've confirmed that change. Okay? Now we've already imported this asset in, which is maybe why it's not working. Yeah, this is going to be a sticky parameter. So let's do, just want to make sure, did it re-import it? It did. So actually the one that we wanted, and I apologize, the one that we wanted was model name plus model material name. And let's look at what it's called. Yeah. So at least now, with that third option enabled, we have an idea of what model that this is associated with. But it's still coming in as no name. Let's figure out why. Let's figure out why. And I think I know why. Okay? I'm actually going to delete this game object. Yep, delete. And I'm going to delete both of these things too. And we're going to re-export. We're going to make a change over in Modo. Because why everything is showing up as no name, if we go into our shader tree, the actual material is just called material. And that's being translated over into Unity as no name. Okay? So here's what we need to do. We need to go in and change the name of each one of our materials to match their role inside of our shading network inside of Modo. Okay? So we can't rely exclusively on the material group, its name. We also have to change this. Let's just put this to create. There we go. And let's export this bad boy once more. Let's just try it. Export selected layers, FBX. And I'm going to overwrite the file that's sitting on my in my folder here. There we go. Let's jump back over into Unity and re-import that asset. There we go. No, and it's still coming across as no name. How dare you?
In your Modo preferences, go into File IO, FX IO, and turn on Save Material.
Ah, thank you. Yes, yes, yes.
By default.
Yeah, so we're in a Modo preferences, okay? And File IO, FBX IO. And what we need to change, save materials. Save materials. Just make sure. All right, let's do that. Let's try again. Overwrite the file. Okay. And let's delete this and delete it. Automatically did it for me. Delete all this just so we have a clean install of this asset. So we'll import it now with that new change to our Modo preferences. Awesome. And now if we look at these, yes, wonderful. There it is. Now the name of the material is coming across as well, which is what we want. So that's a critical value. I wonder if the guys down at the Foundry have turned that off by default, because you didn't used to have to turn that on. I wonder if that's now off by default in 901. So just make sure inside of your FBX IO settings, you do save materials. Turn that bad boy on. That way, it preserves the names of everything that you've created over here. With that said, let's do this one more time. Actually, I want to return the name of the actual material back to the word material. I'll leave the material group's name to create. Let's export again. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. Okay, let's go over into Unity, get rid of all this stuff real fast. Okay. I'll re-export from Modo. Mm-hmm. Just layers, you got it. Okay, let's see. Yes, great. So with that property enabled inside of Modo, you don't have to go in and change the name of the physical material. Leaving the material group's name as is will send the material name correctly over here into Unity, which is kind of nice. However, I am going to get rid of all that rig stuff. We don't want any rigs, and we don't want any animations. Awesome. We just want the geometry. So this is what I'm after, okay? And we now have a material as well that's associated with that object, okay? Okay. Questions so far? So the assets that we import into Unity are globally available to us inside this project folder. But let's look at physically what the little database inside the project directory, inside of, on my desktop has done for us. Because this assets folder is seemingly magical. Let me open up my Finder window here. I'll travel to my desktop, and there's Pat's Crate game just chilling right there. And if I open up the assets library, check it out. What has it done? What has it done? Bingo, it's copied it, okay? We've made a duplicate of that FBX file inside of our assets directory, okay? Let me show you something here. Make a new Finder window. And the one on the left, I'm going to navigate to just my desktop. And here's the raw 3D assets folder, right? There's that one, and then there's that one, okay? This is another reason why we want to have things separated out. We always want to make sure that we have access to the asset externally from the game, okay? It copies the file. It doesn't move it. It copies the file from the location that we saved it and places it inside your assets directory in your project folder, okay? In every sense, back here in Unity, this environment here is the assets folder over there in my Finder window. They are exactly the same. If you look at the folders, we have editor, materials, and standard assets. Look at this Finder window. Editor, material, and standard assets. It's literally the exact same place. It's the exact same folder. The assets folder in your project directory represents the contents of our project tab here in Unity. They are the exact same bits of info. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. All right. So when you're saving things out of Modo, do not, and this is kind of I hope that you're disciplined in this because this will cause problems if you're not. Do not save things into your assets folder, okay? Save your content into the local model folder as I've done here. And then when you import it, it will copy that file into your asset directory. It makes it very clean, and it ensures that you always have access to the exact same version of the model that's in the game outside of the game, right? Because remember, this assets directory is going to be an environment that many, many people work in. We don't want to be doing our work on the files that are physically in that folder. Okay, like say, maybe my art director comes and says, Pat, I love what you've done here, but we need to change the shape of my crate, okay? I'm not going to go into the file that's currently in the assets folder and work off of that, right? I need to work with the raw assets in the model folder and then export and overwrite the file that's in my assets folder, right? It ensures that nothing gets lost and everyone's working on the exact same version of the file at any given time, okay? All right, let's jump back over into Unity here real fast, and we'll do one more thing, and then we'll take a break, okay? So down here in our project tab, we have all the assets that are globally available to us. But the one thing that we don't have at the moment is a level. We don't have that scene file, right? How do we create a scene file, a level within the game? Has anyone stumbled upon it? It's so easy, it's hard. If you go to the top of the screen where it says File, all we basically need to do, File, is Save Scene. Save Scene, okay? And let's call this one Level. Oops, I can't spell today. Level 01. And check it out. notice where it's trying to save this file. To the assets folder, okay? Unity wants to place everything in that assets folder and let it, okay? Let it place everything in that assets folder. Once I hit OK here, you'll very quickly see what the Unity game engine is doing. Let's hit save. Boop. And check it out. Now we have a new global asset available to us, level 1. You have not saved any of your work until you have a scene file, okay? It's just like an untitled Modo project file. You want to save your work. In addition, up here at the application frame, this part of your application frame will tell you specifically what scene within your game you're currently working on. So this is the scene. This is the name of the game, Pat's Crate Game. So I need to put my crate in my level, okay? How do I do this? I got my little crate asset down there. How do I get it into the actual game level itself so I can start building with it? Nope. That will come next. We'll do that after the break.
Okay. So you just drag and drop.
Just drag and drop, man. Now, where are we dragging and dropping to?
Well, you can do if you want a place to do it in the actual viewer right there, or you can do it in the hierarchy if you just want it to be the origin.
Bingo. Okay. The hierarchy over here is a representation of the game objects that are currently in level 1 and exclusively in level 1. Okay. So the project tab is our global folder of assets that can be placed in any level. And then the hierarchy tab is only showing us the contents that are currently in the open scene file, which for us is just level 1. Okay? Now these are the 2 default game objects that come with every scene file. We have a main camera and a directional light. Okay? We can import our little crate into our game level by doing one of 2 things. As Tyler pointed out, I can either drag and drop over in here, and you can see that my crate is showing up, or I can drag and drop it into my hierarchy, and that crate will automatically show up at the origin of our universe. Okay? Pretty cool, huh? That's how easy it is to work inside of Unity. We're going to take a little break, and then when we come back from our break, we'll start talking about how we can start to flush out the scene a little bit more, import some textures, and talking about the role of normal maps instead of our production pipeline. Let's take a break, though, okay? Like a small little 5-minute break. Okay, so where we left off, I think we left off in Unity, if I remember correctly, and things are starting to work pretty well. However, we need to start working inside of that OpenGL environment, okay? Now, luckily for us, the keyboard shortcuts to navigate around inside of this environment is really, really easy. So since we have an asset in there now, let's start working in here. This OpenGL environment is very, very similar to that of the environment that we're used to working with over inside of Modo. Okay, we can orbit, we can pan, and of course we can zoom. Okay, now those three commands are paired to the Option key on your Mac. Okay, Option key. So Option left mouse button will allow you to do the orbit. Option middle mouse button is the pan. And Option right mouse button is the zoom in and zoom out. Okay. Oops, excuse me. So it takes a couple seconds for your brain to kind of reprogram with the new keyboard shortcuts. I know I do that often. I just did it 2 seconds ago where I started using the Modo keyboard shortcuts to work inside your environment. But it's just Option left mouse button, middle mouse button, right mouse button. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it takes a little getting used to, but you'll get it. Okay. Now, in addition, you can also hold down the right mouse button. Check this out. So I'm holding down the right mouse button, and I get this kind of view. But if you use the WASD keys, you can actually fly around and strafe, just like a first-person shooter. Yeah, Q and E is up and down. So there's some folks like working in this environment. Working with those kind of key bindings, that's cool. I think in certain situations on very big levels, it's actually a little bit easier to navigate these enormous environments using that keyboard shortcut versus just kind of like zooming out, panning. It's a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit more organic using the right mouse in combination with the WASD keys. Okay, so multiple ways of getting there. This is kind of an old school input method of working inside this OpenGL environment. Okay. A couple other things. Of course, you can use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out as well. I think I like using the right mouse button, but scroll wheel works as well. Okay. You've probably have noticed that you have a very, very, very basic compass in the upper right-hand corner of your environment. Now, I draw this to your attention because this allows us to do a couple different things. It allows us to view our scenes from orthographic views, but look carefully at what it says underneath the compass. What's it say? Pers. What's it short for? Perspective. Okay. While we're in this perspective mode, clicking on, let me zoom out. I'm going to click on this green guy, which will allow me to see my scene from the top. Are we looking at my scene from an orthographic view right now? No, it's still perspective. You can see the foreshortening that's going on. And in addition, you can also orbit. Okay? So really what this has done is it really hasn't changed it to like looking through your scene from the top or from the side, like what we're used to doing over in Modo. Okay? These are more kind of like shortcuts to look at our scene from the top in perspective, from the side in perspective. Okay? Now, if you wanted to work inside that orthographic environment, inside of a world that is devoid and where perspective is absent, you can do it very quickly and very easily, but it requires you to click on the center cube. When I click on the center cube, check out what happens down here. Now it says ISO. Does anyone know what ISO means? Isometric. And now, this is what a cube looks like when there's no perspective infused into the scene itself. Okay? Everything's isometric now. Or orthographic. Kind of depends on how you want to look at it. Okay? It's still a cube, still 3D, but now we've removed all perspective from the environment. And our little hotkeys here give us a much more realistic approach. Okay? This is great for layout. If you're trying to figure out the spatial relationships between all the different components of your level, I often do that. I often do this. Okay? Getting back into a perspective environment is super easy. Just click on the little yellow cube. Oops. And we're back. Here we go. Keyboard shortcuts that are good to write down in your notes. Okay? If you're super zoomed out, maybe you want to focus on that crate. if you select it over inside of your hierarchy, or if you have it currently selected inside of your OpenGL viewport, the F key, F for focus, will allow us to zoom in quickly on that component, okay? So the F key is focus. It's basically like very similar to the auto fit that we've been working with the A key over in Modo. They're very identical. It's a good one to write down in your notes, because when we get into very dense scenes, it's going to be difficult to jump around quickly to different game objects in our environment. Okay. So life is good, right? So life is good. Of course, we have, within any object selected, up here in our toolbar, move, rotate, and scale. This one over here, this is actually a new one. What's that one going to do? Oh, kind of a disproportionate scale. Cool.
Looks like it just says transform, generate transform.
Yeah, that's actually new. I've never actually seen this before in version 5. Yeah, it is kind of strange because it allows us to disproportionately scale by clicking on the outside guys. And if we change our view, it's kind of like the work plane, actually. Huh, interesting. It'll change its orientation.
It might be interesting for if you want like an alternative to like a
Center guy moves.
For like an effect, or what? Well, let's say if you want like a trail behind your character, but you didn't want it to be like a motion blur. You just had it stretch.
Yeah.
Well, like
Yeah.
have that hook up to a script or something.
Interesting tool. Interesting
That'd be
tool.
pretty cool, like
Yeah.
having like a specific. Like
Well, it's
type
just.
of clothing.
Well, I think this it's just changing. It's a different way of changing all the transform channels, right? So we're still just manipulating the scale and position values, but a little bit more interactively. Constrains it. Yeah, interesting. Interesting tool. I don't know. I'm sure they have a design for it, but I'm just going to use the traditional move, rotate, and scale. These guys will do the exact same thing, which is kind of nice. Rotate is just how you would expect it to be. You can rotate along single axes, or you can tumble in the center if you click on it there. Move actually gives you, of course, indicator handles, but it also gives you coplanar handles, which I use a lot when positioning these elements around the scene. Clicking on this little green cube is going to move this object exclusively along the X and the Z, just like over in Modo. Question? No, okay. Okay. So what is the one thing that's absolutely missing from my crate here? The texture, okay? We need to have that texture, okay? When we export out of Modo, that texture is not going to come along for the ride, okay? We need to import that texture individually back into Unity and reapply it to the material, okay? Now this is going to get applied to the material, not the game object. Since there's a direct relationship between the material and the game object, everything's going to update at the exact same time. However, since now that we're working in a more complex environment, I think I want to make a folder here. Call these textures. There we go. And I'm also going to create a new folder. Call these models or meshes. Meshes work. Let's do meshes. Why not? Makes sense to me. Scenes is a good one to have. Scenes, absolutely. It's important that you stay organized. Okay, scene, that one will go in there. Okay, this will go inside of meshes. And of course, textures has nothing in it. Let's jump into the textures folder and import in the diffuse texture map for my crate, which happens to be that guy right there. All right, rock and roll. There it is. Awesome sauce. Okay, so now we have that texture in, and life is good. And now, however, we have a little bit of a challenge in front of us. It's currently not applied to that material. If I go into materials, here it is, okay? What we need to do is associate that new image map and connect it to the material network over here. This material is currently driving how the computer is shading my little box. I can show that to you. I can prove it beyond a doubt. I have the material selected. It's called crate. If I go over to the inspector here, Check it out. Under the albedo section, this is basically a fancy word for diffuse color. Right now, the color is gray. I click on my little image swatch. Here's my color picker. Excuse me. Yep. Check it out. See how making a change to the diffuse color value immediately changes that object in our scene, right? So there's a live link here between the albedo. These little squares are image wells. This is where we're going to make the connection with the actual image map itself, okay? So how in the world are we going to make a connection with the actual texture? Well, in version 5, they've made it a little bit more difficult to see. These little targets here, these little targets are going to open up an asset browser. It's going to show you every image that we now can place inside of that image well. So now we're physically searching for crate, texture, diffuse 1. Another good example of why having solid naming conventions really, really helps. Because as you can see, there's a bunch going on. And this is looking at globally every single image that's imported into my project file. On a full-blown game, imagine that you're working on, Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront. They have thousands of individual textures. Do you think they're going to be scrolling, visually looking for what they want? No, they're going to use the naming convention to help them filter the search parameters. Let me show you. I spelled it wrong. There we go. CR, and there's the crate. Awesome. Made a connection. I've loaded that image into the image well, and you can see that it's showing up on the actual asset now. However, it's red. That's not what I want. Or maybe it is. I don't know. It'd be fun. No, it's not what I want, right? I went through all that pain and trouble and effort to make this texture look pretty photorealistic. Why is it red? Well, it's because we tinted that albedo color. By changing the color here, we tint the texture. Now, at times, this is a good thing. We want to do this, okay? I know you've seen this in games when the character changes its color as maybe they're losing health, or if maybe some sort of damage or effect or magic has been infused on that character, the texture changes color. Well, the man behind the curtain is they're just tinting that texture, and they're cycling it, making it glow, making it oscillate. However, to get it back to its original color, we have to change the albedo color to white. Okay. If you look carefully here, this if we keep it inside the grayscales, we get to increase and decrease the brightness of that texture. So if we go all the way down to black, it's going to be dark, completely dark. And all the way to white is going to be a 100% representation of what you imported, or what you created over in Photoshop. And there it is. Looking pretty good, huh? So that's how easy it is to make an association with the material. This happens at the material level. We apply texture to a material. A little bit different than how we were working with it over inside of Modo, right? Yeah? Okay. Now things are looking pretty good in here. However, I would love to be able to walk around. Maybe check out, play the game, check out my crate from a number of different angles. Let's do that real fast. Not everything in our game has to be generated over in Modo or over in some other application. We can do a tremendous amount right here in Unity. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to create some game objects inside of this game file. Okay? So at the top of the screen where it says game object, check it out. 3D objects, and these are all the 3D objects that we can physically infuse into our project here in Unity. And I think I'm just going to do a plane. There it is. Haha! Awesome. Looking good. Looks like it's a little bit low. Actually, this needs the Y value needs to be at 0. Wonderful. We're on our way. FYI, I hate having the grid on instead of Unity. It drives me crazy because it always gets in the way, and this is a great example. I can see that I have a plane down here, and the grid, the background grid, is just kind of getting in the way. If you want to turn it off, as I often do, going to the Gizmos tab up here, the pull-down menu, and then just turn Show Grid off. There we go. Now, it's a little bit easier to see what's going on in my little universe here. Let me select that guy, select my plane, I'm just going to make it bigger globally. So I have a little bit more of a playground to work in here. Awesome. And now, let's do this. This is actually kind of cool. Did I import in? Yeah, I imported in some cameras when I first created this project. Here it is, prefab. Oh, I didn't want cameras, I wanted characters. So I imported in the wrong standard assets folder. That's okay, we can import more in. It's no problem. Go to assets, import package. Here you go. These were all those packages that were initially imported into our project when we created the project. And if you remember, I mentioned that this is not written in stone. You can either import all of them or none of them upon creation, because we can always come back in and add them in after the fact. And here's how you do it, okay? Import package. And what I'm looking for is the characters package, because it comes with a whole bunch of preset characters that we can use to start playing our game. Let's just do it. Huh? Assets and then import package. Are you guys not getting that on yours?
I'm getting assets, import package, custom package.
Yeah, so those packages aren't installed in that machine. They must not have installed the content on all the client machines in here. I can give you these packages. They come for free.
It looks like they're on the standard project, but it's not this one. Like open up one of the other projects, the standard assets project.
No, that's different. That's very different, because if you open up another project, all the assets that are in that project that were there when they were created are going to come along for the ride. We're importing new packages, right? I just really think that the packages haven't been installed in your machines. Here's the test. You can find all these packages inside of your Unity application directory. So if I go into my applications folder here in the Mac, of course down here at the bottom we have Unity, standard assets. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that you guys don't have any of those packages in that standard assets directory, right? Can you do that for me? Just look on your Mac, go into your applications folder. Exactly. So that's, yeah. So you don't have it. So our IT guys didn't install it when they put Unity on your machines. I can give these to you. However, I don't know how it's going to work, because these machines are all reset at midnight every night. So I'll have to give them to you every single week. Or I can give them to you and you can put them on your own thumb drives. And then you can download them, whenever you want. They're free. They come with Unity. They may actually be on the Unity website as well. Here, I'll do this just so everyone can play along. I'm going to open up Remote Desktop, and I'm going to play. So I'm going to do something fancy here. Oops. On every single machine in here, I'm going to copy a file. Good. It actually remembered. Now, this may take a second because it's like 200 megabytes. Let's just see what happens. So it's sending you this. Once that progress bar is done, you should have all those packages inside your machines. I love Remote Desktop. It's so great. I feel like a magician.
So is that just a Mac on desktop, or is that a school thing?
Say again?
Just a standard on desktop thing that comes to Mac?
Yeah, you have to buy it, but it is an application that Apple has created. It's pretty fantastic.
Right.
Try it again. Try it again. Now go assets, import package. Did it all show up for you guys? Yeah? Great. Awesome. So I'm working with the characters package. It's magic. Hopefully those will stay where they are when the computer recycles or cycles at the end of the night. So if you go back into your project browser over here, where we're going is this characters folder. And I think I'm just going to do the first person character. And specifically, we're going into the prefabs folder. And there's two prefabs, the first person controller in the rigid body first-person controller. We'll talk about the roles of each one of these individually as we go along. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab my first-person controller, drag it over here. There it is. And then with the move tool, I want to move it up above the ground plane. If it's in the ground plane, your character is going to fall through the universe when you hit the play button. It's just going to fall through the ground. Let me show you. It's actually kind of fun. So if your character is in the ground like this, watch what happens when I hit the play button. I'm going to play my game. Oh, no, that's actually a positive change. Something different in version 5. You used to fall through the environment. So now, with my game playing, you can see that I can walk around, I can jump over my crate. I should be able to walk through my crate. We'll talk about collision later. But pretty neat, huh? Even getting stereo sound. I don't know why I'm getting stereo sound.
Oh, I think it's the.
Oh, yeah. Goodbye, cruel world. Woo!
I think it's because.
I'm going to fall forever and ever and ever. Why am I going to fall forever? There's no bottom. There's nothing in our game environment that tells me to respawn, that I've died. There's no bottom in our universe. It's an infinite space. It really is. Let's stop the game, and everything will get reset.
It's coming from that location where you're starting from. It's not moving with the character.
Which brings up a really good idea, and this is something that I often do when I'm troubleshooting and debugging my game. When we hit the play button, we lose access to that scene tab, and we're only presented with our game tab. This is actually kind of a frustrating thing for me, because I need to be able to see precisely what's going on in the actual level to help me figure out where my problems are. The cool thing about the Unity interface is that it's plastic. We get to change these interface and these windows around to make it fit our work style. This actually doesn't work for me. I like to change it a little bit differently. Let me show you how I like to change my interface. And you'll probably see me working in this environment going forward in this class. Yeah?
Is there a question for you're just thinking a first-person view of what you're doing? Like when people make a third, kind of like a view where you see the character behind you.
Yeah, third-person view, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so would that mean you have to make the character first and then set the camera up back there?
Yep. You got it. You got it. I think there may actually be a third-person character. Yeah, let's do it real fast. Where's the prefab? There it is. Let's do it real fast. I'm going to get rid of my first-person controller. Delete that guy. And let's see. There's the dude. Let's do this one. I'll drop him in. The main camera? Yeah. All right, let's see what happens when I play the game now. Absolutely nothing. Let's see. I don't have any experience with this thing. Let's see. Third-person controller. Let's see what we got. So we have an animator in here, a rigid body, a collider. Does this thing come with a camera? Let's see. Is there a variable in here that allows us to define what that camera is? Did you just parent the camera to the? Yeah. All right. Let's put this where you want it to go. There we go. I'll parent it to the third-person controller. Let's see what happens now. Aha. There we go. Yeah. Woo. But this is, so still a lot to fix on here, but you can get the general idea, right? People spend a lot of energy, and I mean, this is actually kind of crazy. As I try to move backwards, I'm actually running into the camera, and it's stopping my character from moving backwards. Yeah. All right. All right, all right. Anyways, I don't want to overcomplicate it because we're going much further past where I was anticipating going today. Let's get back to the idea of that plastic interface, because you want to be able to change how the computer is displaying all these windows to make it easier for you as the developer to work inside of the application. So here's how I like to do it. I like to put my hierarchy on the other side. I like to have my hierarchy right next to my inspector, so I can work here and then not have to go very far with my mouse to make changes. In addition, I'm also going to place my project underneath, there we go, underneath my hierarchy. And my console is going to go up here, okay? I want to take my game tab and put it below, so you can really customize your interface to get what you're after. Now, with this, I got my scene view up here. This is actually kind of cool. With your scene view open, you can play your game, and you can see all your characters walking around. So you can see precisely what the computer's doing. And so when I walk backwards, I can see that I'm actually running into my camera. Pretty cool, huh? So let's commit suicide. Jump off the edge. Too much fun. All right. So change your interface. Don't fight it. It's there to help you. It really is. And you're in the driver's seat with how Unity is displaying all this stuff. One of the things that I often do, since I kind of like to stack it like this, works easier just for my brain. If I had 2 computer monitors, it'd be very different. But since I'm on one small computer monitor, I often change how the computer's drawing my project tab. And you have 2 options. This is the 2-column layout, right? Where you have the folders on one side, and then the files that are in that folder on the other. You can change this if you'd like. I actually happen to like changing it. Just makes it a little bit easier for my brain to process it. If you go to the upper right-hand corner of the project tab, or any tab for that matter, you can change it to a 1-column layout. And now it kind of behaves very similarly to my, my Macintosh Finder window, right? Just a list view of all the objects inside of my game. Pretty neat, huh? Pretty neat. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to get rid of my third-person controller prefab because it's causing some problems. Get my camera out of there. And I'm going to go back into characters into first person. Let's just grab that guy and play my game. Let's see where we're at. Oh, there we go. Just fell through. The rigid body, first person rigid body one, falls through. So I'm going to raise it up before I play. Bloop. There we go. Awesome. Okay. Okay, so let's look at what we got on the actual rendering of our object downstairs inside of our game environment, because it's looking pretty great. The diffuse texture is looking awesome, by the way. Haha, pretty cool. But it's looking very, very flat. It looks very computer generated. It doesn't attract my eye, and it doesn't recreate that visual intensity that I'm after. Because the one thing that it doesn't have at the moment is any surface relief, right? Going back to what we talked about last week through the lens of creating bump maps, we need to create all those little peaks and valleys here inside of our game engine. Now, the game engines use a separate piece of technology that behaves similarly to bump maps, but they're called normal maps, okay? If we go and select the material that's responsible for driving this simulation here, let me just grab it real fast. Here it is, create. You can see that over inside of our material inspector, we have a channel here for normal maps, okay? Unity 5 works inside of a physically based rendering environment. So it's not working with like specularity, it's not working with reflection amounts, it's working with metallic, smooth or sharp, okay? It's working with height and occlusion and emission, and there's a lot of different channels that are being exposed that you see in all other physically based rendering environments. It's pretty neat, actually. And we get to stack materials, we get to stack layers of textures on top of each other, which is very, very neat. We're going to talk about that in the future, okay? It's pretty cool. However, let's go in and start looking at what a normal map's going to give us. Initially, what I'm going to do, I already have one created because I'm like Julia Childs up here, right? look what's cooking in the oven, right? I already got one done because I wanted to see what the product and what the purpose behind all this is before we talk about how we create it. It's a texture map, like any other texture map, okay? It looks a little bit funky. It looks very, very different. There it is. This is a normal map. Purple and pink things, okay? Now these purple and pink pixels inside the texture play a very specific role in helping determine the surface relief, the height information, if you will, across all of our polygons on our models, all right? So it's very similar, and it behaves very similarly to that of a bump map. It's like a bump map, okay? But it's all purple and stuff. It's pretty neat, okay? Let me import this texture in real fast. Even textures come in as assets. Here we go. There it is. Now, with it selected, one of the things that I like to do, but you don't necessarily have to do it, inside of the inspector, the texture type, let's just tell the entire computer that this is a normal map. Actually, let's not do that because it looks like it's going to, yeah. Oh, let's not do that in this case. Yeah, life is good. So let's go back into my material. Onto the normal section, I'll click on the little image. There it is, create normals. Awesome. It says this texture is not marked as a normal map, fix now. Boom, that's what I'm after. Ha, mission accomplished. This is exactly what I'm after. Now you can very easily see the idea of bumps and surface relief going across the surface. These also interact with all the lights inside of our environments, okay? So if I start rotating my lights a little bit, yeah, let's see if I can get a good example here. Yeah, you can see that the shadows, the local shadows on the actual object itself are responding favorably to the changing of all of these shadows. That's what we're after. We want the bump and the height information on the local model to respond to the global lighting parameters inside of our scene, okay? Like a real object would, right? Because if this was a real create, the position of the lights inside of our scene would determine the direction of the shadows on the object itself. They're incredibly powerful, and we're going to be using them all over the place. This is how we create high detail and high resolution texture information on our objects, okay? You saw this a moment ago with that character, that third-person character. The panel details of that character, that's not geometry. All that's coming from a normal map. It's pretty neat. Let me see if we can find it real fast. So you guys have a point of reference. Textures, yeah. Let's check it out. So there's the normal map for that character. So all the webbing, the detail information on the character is coming from the height map, from that normal map, okay? It's not coming from geometry. It started off as geometry. I can almost guarantee that it started off as geometry. But what we end up with, something that looks like this, okay? We want to be able to use geometry to help us create all of our normal maps. And in Modo, it's really, really easy to do that. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I want to jump back over into Modo, and I'm going to use our bump map to give us the result that we're after. So back in Modo, let's import the bump map for this guy. There it is. Awesome. Let's change its effect from diffuse color to bump. Let's go check it out in our rendering interface. Oops. I only have one render output at the moment, so let me just change it real fast to final color so we can get a really good understanding of the way this looks. And I think the defaults are pretty fantastic. I would, of course, go in and start changing the bump amplitude and maybe the colors of my bump map to really give me the high quality result. The cool thing that we can do inside of Modo is that we can take all of this height information that's created from a bump map and translate that into a normal map. It's a little bit of a different process, requires some baking, so you absolutely have to have your model completely done and UV'd, okay? It's really easy to do it though. Let me show you the process. So there are some sequence, and definitely leverage the power of the live stream to help you walk through this sequence, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create a new texture inside of Modo. So inside of our shader tree, we'll go add layer. image map. We're not going to load an image. We want the computer to create a brand new blank image for me. So you're going to, this time, we're going to go new image. Okay? It's going to ask me to pick a location. I'm going to put it inside of my crate. Now, I already have a crate normal, so we'll do this. We'll do crate normal test that way, so at least we know it's different. It's going to be in PNG, and we'll hit save. The resolution will be 1K like its parent object, and the format's going to be RGBA, so we get some alpha information in there as well. We'll hit OK, and there it is. Now, we have some work inside of our shader tree that we need to continue to do. Okay? Right now, if you look at the effect of this, this new blank texture is affecting the diffuse color values. We don't want that. We want it to capture and bake normal map information. So the next step is to change the effect from diffuse color to normal, which you can find inside the surface shading category. It's right there. Normal. Now, it may look a little different. I'm good. Mine's pretty happy. Now, the next thing that we have to ensure is that we have to ensure that this new normal map is outside of that material group. We want it to be evaluated last. Remember, the shader tree starts at the bottom, where the base material is residing, and works its way up towards the top. So it starts down here, and it goes vertical up. We want the normal map, or basically we want the contents of this image, or of this material group, to be evaluated just right before the computer bakes the normal map. So yes, we're going this way. This way. Has to be outside of the material group in order for this to work. Okay? Now, the next step is relatively easy. You want to make sure that the item is selected. Incidentally, let's just triple check to make sure that the crate low UV map is also selected. On the new empty texture that we're about to bake, just ensure that under the texture locator that we are also using the exact same UV map, and we're good to go, as they say. So the next bit is actually a little bit easy. It's pretty cool. We're going to right-click on the new blank texture, and then from the contextual menu, bake from object to texture. What the computer is going to do in this process is look at the physical geometry in the scene, and it's going to take that geometry and bake all of its normal, or its bump, or its height information, if you will, and bake that onto our texture map. So it's going to look at the object, it's going to look at the geometry, and use that geometric information to help me create a normal map. Let's do it real fast. You're going to get a little pop-over when you click on this option. Oops, I missed it. There we go. Leave the distance at 0 feet for now, okay? When you troubleshoot, you'll want to increase this value and play around with it. We'll talk about that more in the future. But for now, let's just leave it at 0 feet and see what the computer makes for me. Voila. Wonderful. So all these little purple pixels, purple and pink and green pixels, are coming from the height information that was infused and created by the bump map. And bloop, there it is. I'm done. Mission accomplished. I've extracted all that height information from my model, and I've baked it into a normal map. Rock and roll, man. Rock and roll. It's pretty neat. Of course, we're going to want to save this. You're more than welcome to close the window, because all of this has been preserved inside of that texture. But what you want to make sure you do is not save preset. I'm sorry. Go into images. Here it is. Just make sure you save this. If you don't save it inside of Modo, the file actually doesn't get saved. And let's just put this back over here. Excuse me. So here's the test PNG that I just created inside of Modo. Okay? Pretty neat, huh? Pretty neat. Let's do it one more time. This time we're going to do it with a different project file to help you through this process. Okay? And this is something that I'm going to give you guys. I'm going to give you both of these two little assets, or I'll probably just give you this one. And I want you to practice this, because it takes some muscle memory to get good at it. So I want to place my little hex pattern here on y'all's desktop. Yoink. So it should be there. Did it show up? Yep. Okay. So this is going to be a bump map that we're going to apply to just a simple plane inside of Modo. Let's do it real fast, okay? So let's create a new project file, or I'm going to create a new project file. And inside that new project file, I'm just going to insert a simple little geometric plane. That's it. So walk me through the steps here. What should we look to be doing in order to create that bump map? What's the first thing we're going to do to this polygon? Bingo. We're going to save it into a material group, or we're going to associate this polygon with a material group. So hit the M key. We'll just call this, I don't know, plane awesome. All right, now, what's next? What's next? Add the image map. So we'll load in that image map that I just gave you guys, the little hex pattern guy. There we go. Cool. What's next? So we need to change its effect from diffuse color to bump. And now is a pretty good time to start heading over. And you can actually see the effects inside the advanced OpenGL viewport now, which is nice. Oops, let me turn my grid off too. There we go. Aha, awesome. If we go into the render environment, fire off my render, you can see what we're getting. FYI, this is exactly how they do floors in video games. Almost all walls and most floors are single polygons. They're very, very flat. It's the texture that goes on top of it that gives us the illusion of height. All right, so now that we've established the look of our little floor tile here, what's the next step? You could make more floor tiles. You're more than welcome to do that. This is the Italian texture, by the way. So increasing and decreasing the horizontal wrap will allow you to create a little fun texture here. Okay, so how do I create a normal map? How do I save all this information out to that normal? Let's go through the sequence one more time. So we have to create a new image, right? So add layer, image, add layer, image map, new image, okay? Now, it's kind of, it's wrought with danger in this popover because we have new image folder, new image group, and then new image. So make sure we do a new image, okay? Give it a good name. I'm going to put mine, yeah. There we go. I like working with PNGs. That's just a personal preference. I want to make it a 1K texture, and then hit OK. All right. Now, where is this new texture going to go inside of our shader tree? You got it. Basically below the base shader. You want this element to be evaluated last. So I'm going to put it right below the base shader. Okay. Make sure it's still looking the way I want it to look. Yep. Life is good. I also want to just triple check to make sure that we're using the correct UV map, and I believe we are. Okay. Okay. What's next? Set it to normal. We have to change the effect from diffuse color to normal, which you can find under the surface shading category. Now what? Well, we got to make sure that we're selecting the right mesh item first, right? Yeah, we got to make sure we have the plane selected, and just want to make sure, yep, that the UV map on that plane is selected as well. So we tell the computer which coloring book to use. All right. Hold on one second. There we go. Decided to change my example to give you guys exactly what you guys are getting to. Okay. So now, back on my normal map, right-click, bake from object to texture, leave the distance at 0 feet. Hit OK. Whoop, there it goes. It creates the normal map for us. Okay? Was everyone able to do this? Success? Okay. That's the sequence. That's the sequence. for creating and baking normal maps inside of Modo. We're going to be doing this more and often as we go through this process, okay? Because what it gives us is a very, very powerful bump map system over in our game engine, okay?
So if you don't save it,
Yeah, so where do you save it? You don't have to save it down here, right? Because that will save a new image. We've already actually saved and created this file on our desktop or wherever you were saving it. When I went File New, let's see. Yeah, check it out. So this is the file that was generated when I went Add Layer, New, or Add Layer, Image Map, New Image, right? It created background floor pattern, normal test.png. Do you see any purple in there? No. It's not going to be populated, or all those purple pixels won't be placed in the image until we save it in our Images tab, okay? So if you go back into Modo, check it out. Up here in our Images tab, here's our background floor pattern that we just baked. See the little asterisk next to the word test? That's Modo telling us, hey, this hasn't been saved yet, okay? I've stored it just temporarily, internally inside of Modo, but I haven't saved it permanently on my hard drive. So we'll right-click on this. Of course, we'll hit Save. That asterisk goes away, and if we were to return to the desktop, check it out. Boom! Now I got our normal map. Rock and roll. Let's jump back over into Unity real fast, and I want to show you one other thing. This is actually kind of cool since we're working with materials a lot today. I want to import in that pattern that we just created. There it is. Awesome. Just import it into the system. Let's, under texture type, let's tell the computer that this is a normal map. And it kind of destroyed it for me. So let me see if I can go back in time. Let's not. There we go. Awesome. No, because we don't have a grayscale. We'll leave this as is, just for the time being. Just for the time being, okay? Yeah, texture type is set to texture at the moment. We'll come back and we'll change this in a minute. But check this action out. I want to put a material on my floor. Or I need to put this texture on the floor. I want this thing to go on that floor right there. In order to do that, we have to create a material. Everything inside of our game world is associated with the material. A little bit different from how we worked over in Modo, right? Where we can have images affecting our models that didn't have associated materials, right? In Modo, the material group is the element that filters which objects get which textures. Here in Modo, or excuse me, here in Unity, is the actual material that does that filtering, okay? So, and if I wanted to put this texture on that floor, on that ground plane, I have to generate a new material. Got my material folder selected. This create pull-down menu will allow me to do that. And let's just do it. We'll create a material. Okay, and we'll call this floor. Awesome. And much like we did earlier, I can, under the normal map section, I can click on the target. Or here's something else that's cool. If you're working inside this single plane environment as I am, check this action out. This is actually kind of neat. You can actually utilize a little drag and drop. Here's the normal map. I want to drag my normal map. Notice that I have the floor material selected. I want to drag my normal map into the normal map image well and let go. You can see downstairs what it looks like. Looking good. Let's do fix now. Yep, now it's working. I think what's going on is that it's just getting that normal map into the color space of Unity versus the color space of Modo. So we've created the floor material. We've applied our normal map. But have we associated that material with the floor game object, that plane? No. How do we do it? Take a guess. So easy, it's hard. Drag and drop. It's pretty cool. So now I can grab that floor material drag it on top, let go, you even get this nice little preview. Let's play our game, see what we get. Awesome. Man, all those hex values are pretty gigantic. I really don't get a sense of its role inside of the scale of the object. So has anyone noticed from the material properties what value we need to change in order to get what we're after? Tiling, you got it. Let's put this at like 2 by 2. You can see how we interactively can adjust it. And it's not a perfect tiling texture, by the way. I got a little bit of a small diamond here. Let's do 3 by 3. And I'm also going to change the albedo color a little bit. Let's make it, yeah, there we go. Now we can actually see it a little bit more directly, right? Let's play our game. Awesome. Pretty cool, huh? Very cool. Now within just a couple seconds, we've created the illusion of a really neat, like stamped metal floor with just using that normal map. Yeah, this is another reason why I love having the game view open downstairs, is that we can see exactly what it looks like in the actual game. 5 by 5. Maybe let's just do 7 by 7. There we go. That's kind of a cooler look. You can prototype very quickly. All right, questions on how to work with these normal maps. This is step 1 into a much larger world, okay? There's more to this conversation that we haven't talked about yet, but I want you guys to start making and considering these normal maps as you go through the process, okay? This is absolutely something that you should look to do for every model that we create going forward. So next week, I'm going to ask you guys to make normal maps for your forge or for your blacksmith shop, okay? So we'll be doing 2 different textures for next week, okay? Of course, this week for our blacksmith shop, we're just going to focus on the geometry. But next week, you're going to do diffuse and normal maps for everything inside of your scene. With that said, let's talk for a second about the actual blacksmith shop, because I think understanding the process that we go through to create these models will really help. I brought the project file with me that you saw in the banner image, and I brought this with me just to kind of illustrate and to highlight some really important production techniques that will get you to that final result much faster. It's a pretty cool looking model. What I'm working, let me jump over to my item list real fast. I want to show you some things. Of course, yeah, go ahead.
Where did you find the reference for that?
Online. It actually dovetails quite beautifully into what I was about to talk about. All models need to start with reference, right? Do some reference collection. I happened to find some imagery online that kind of matched what I wanted to make in my mind, so I was like, let me just make this one, okay? You can make an existing blacksmith shop, make your own, but everything that you build for this assignment needs to be founded in reference. We're going for realism. Now, I'm not saying photorealism, I'm just going for realism. In my mind, that means believability. So if you want to go kind of cartoony or fantasy-based, I say double down on that. Yeah, awesome. I'm going for kind of like, I don't know, a Skyrim-style level of detail on this, okay? But everything needs to begin and end with reference, okay? So here's the actual reference image that I found online. This is it, okay? This is kind of my starting point. Now I can't necessarily model with these images, but they give me a tremendous amount of information as to what this thing looks like. We are artists, by the way, okay? So it's our job to take images that we can't model with and extrapolate and make them recreate it in 3D. Now, why can't I really model with these things? They're not perfectly overgraphic. They are photographs, okay? And there's perspective infused in every single one of these. That's a big problem for me, because now I don't have a blueprint for me to trace. I have guides for me to get to that end result. I did use them as backdrop imagery, But I knew going into it that I'm going to have to fill in the blanks a little bit, that this was just going to help me get me started, get me to that first rough pass, but then I'm going to have to take the ball and kind of run with it and get the rest of the stuff where it needs to be, okay? Great reference image to build from. It also tells me what all the textures or a direction I can go with all my textures. I sliced that image up into the 3 that I used as backdrop items, but as I mentioned, these are not perfect in any sense. They just got me to this, the layout. So here's what I do. Whenever I'm working with a complex piece of geometry, I use those reference objects and I try to build that object as fast as I can with as few pieces. Why?
Because they're going for low poly.
Not necessarily. I even do this for high poly objects.
Because deadlines and
Not really. I do this on projects that I have an infinite amount of time on, personal projects.
get something.
It gives me something to work from, right? It gives me a basic understanding of the spatial relationships between all these different pieces. I have an idea of the total volume that I'm modeling within, right? It gives me an initial first draft that will tell me where I need to spend some energy on, problems that I need to figure out, and areas that I can infuse my creativity on, okay? So I always start with a layout. This is not a perfect model. And in every sense, this is not a model that's going to end up in the game. This one's just for me, just to give me something on the page. This is like a little sketch, okay? This is like a thumbnail design. It's a quick first pass, just to get some polygons in there to see what the three-dimensional shape of this thing really is. You shouldn't discover the three-dimensional shape of your model at the end, right? You should have a laser-focused idea of what the total shape of your model looks like at the beginning, okay? This also gives all of the stakeholders in this model an opportunity to make changes. This took me about 20 minutes to make, probably not even 20 minutes, okay? This is not a perfect model in no sense. This is not a model that I would even send to a game engine, although I could, okay? This is not supposed to be a perfect model. It's just a sketch, okay? Whenever we're designing things to be inserted into a much larger production pipeline, it's important that all the stakeholders have an opportunity to go thumbs up, thumbs down, right? Okay, this is going to work. This is not going to work. Or maybe even do this kind of works. Let's make some big changes on it. We don't want to have to invest, 40 hours of modeling and texturing only to find at the very end, this isn't going to work, okay? That's bad management. It really is. Within 20 minutes, I can bust out a model that approximately gives us an opportunity to make a decision, okay? Now, I model in passes. So the next thing that I do is the rough pass. Now, I have it as a background object. Let me just select it here. There we go. And so right now, I have the rough mesh item selected, and in the background is my layout mesh, okay? The initial draft, that sketch of the model. And in the black wireframe, you can see that there's some pretty big wholesale changes to the actual model itself. I've moved things around, I've made changes, I've extended the roof line in certain areas to accommodate the infusion of new details. It's getting a little bit more closer and closer and closer to what the final model is going to look like. This, in every sense, is probably the asset that's going to go in the game. Because it's relatively low poly, but it infuses a high level of geometric detail that I can use to create the illusion that I'm after, the reality that I'm after. In every sense, the rough pass gives us an opportunity to make a more perfect model representative of what's going to go into the game. At this stage, I'm focusing more on ironing out all the details, figuring out the specific technical specifications of this thing. I don't want to go too crazy with it, but I'm also still exploring some ideas. I take it one step further, and I start making a high-resolution object as well. So here's my high-res one, and I think in this one it's not actually done. Let me reorganize my layers. Here we go. Boop. Yeah, oh, and this one, I don't have the front done. Hold on a sec. I grabbed the wrong one. All right. So here's my layout. Here's my rough. Let me put my rough and my high res next to each other. There we go. So this is now looking more and more like what my final vision for this object is going to be. I'm starting to flesh in a tremendous amount of detail, and I'm doing this so I can bake some textures, create normal maps that I then can apply to my lower resolution object. Okay. It also gives the larger production team a high resolution asset that they can use in promotional materials, for offline renders if they need to. It's all smoke and mirrors, right? It doesn't take me a whole lot of time to get me to the high resolution result. And this, in my opinion, isn't done yet. I still have a lot of work on this project. I've been telling myself for a couple years that I really need to go in and finish my forge. But you guys keep me extraordinarily busy. If you model in passes, you're going to preserve a lot of time. Okay, it might seem like it's better for you and your creativity just to jump in and start modeling it at this level of detail. But trust me when I say that's not the best use of your time. If you explore the shape with a rough layout, okay, explore the shape, explore the form, get a good finite understanding of the totality of this volume, then advancing on to the next stage, believe it or not, is going to be a whole lot easier. You're not having to do any creation at this stage. It's execution of the battle plan. Now we're executing that larger vision.
So for this assignment, we're doing the outside or the inside or both?
You're more than welcome to do both, okay?
I was thinking of something you walk into in game.
Yeah, absolutely. For this one, the expectation is to do the outside. For your final project, you will be doing the inside, so you can walk into some of these buildings, okay? But for this one, just the outsides. Just the outsides. Now, if you look at mine, my insides are very, very, very basic, okay? And they don't even necessarily work as full rooms. There's actually no way to get in there. And I think, there's no way to get inside of there. I put them there just so I can have some color information, so some shadow information that will be created inside of Unity. Let me show you one other thing, just to give you a little bit of foreshadowing towards next week. Of course, all these assets are going to have to be UV mapped as well. But how we work with our UVs and how we do this in the game art pipeline for something like this is very, very different from what you guys are used to working with. Yeah, right. Often people go, whoa, hold on a second. This is a big hot mess, right? And in using the traditional Photoshop process, I'd say, yeah, you're right. This is a disaster. This is not usable. But we're not going to be using that Photoshop-centric process of texturing next week. We're going to talk about a new technique that allows us to create a much higher quality result that's purpose-built for large objects like buildings. Okay? So that will come next week. That'll come next week. Focus on the geometry this week. The next week we'll talk about UV mapping and texturing. Okay? However, since we're going to be focusing on the geometry this week, think to next week. Always think like a chess player. Think 8 or 9 steps. You're going to have to be making UV maps for all this stuff, right? Keep in mind, whenever you duplicate an object, the UVs for that object also get duplicated, okay? So mine is such a great example of this. If you look at my model, I have a lot of cubes. I have a lot of cubes in here. Overwhelmingly, this object is planar, okay? There's not too many cylindrical shapes on this bad boy. I remember when I was making this, I created one of those posts, okay? And I UV mapped it instantly, because I knew that I was going to have a half a dozen of them, okay? So when I started duplicating the posts, the UVs were also duplicated, okay? Same with all of those crossbar framing boards up here on story number 2, all of these guys. They are all approximately the same dimensions, okay? Especially the horizontal and vertical guys. I created one, I UV mapped it, and then when I started to insert that detail around the rest of story number 2, all those UV maps were created automatically for me when I duplicated those polygons. It'll save us some time and energy. It's a whole lot easier to edit UVs than it is to create UVs. So think strategically. Even though there's no expectation to do the UV mapping now, you can get a lot of UV mapping done now just by by making it for one object, and when you duplicate it, it gets duplicated too. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, questions about what we're doing this week for our homework. So we're making a blacksmith shop. Let's go back over into D2L real fast and take a look at some specifics, okay? Making a blacksmith shop, okay? Making a blacksmith shop. You're more than welcome and encouraged to start populating your blacksmith shop with some props, okay? Like anvils and hammers and crates and wine barrels and maybe a shop sign. I've given you a number of opportunities to make some assets, okay? I think that's a great thing to start infusing right now. When you're done with this project, the geometry for a blacksmith shop, geometry for some props, okay? And then you're going to be producing a portfolio kind of work product render, untextured. It's fine to have it be untextured as they are down here at the bottom, okay? I'm expecting them to be untextured. When you're done with this assignment, please make sure you submit both the Modo project file and this portfolio render to the Dropbox on D2O, okay? You guys have been doing a really great job with this. And keep in mind, this is going to be a 2-week assignment. Geometry this week, UV and textures next week. Your lab assignment, and you'll have the remainder of class time to work on this today, is to start doing some reference, okay? I'm going to force my hand. I'm physically forcing you guys to go out and find reference, okay? You cannot do this project without reference. So you need at least 10 pieces of reference imagery that will guide you through this modeling process. Now, with that said, if you find a reference image for a blacksmith shop that actually exists, I'm not going to be expecting you to build that blacksmith shop. I understand the role of reference. It's a guide. I encourage you to use those reference images to be the launching point for your project. If you want to create a one-to-one recreation of that, you don't have to. Okay? Make sense? So 10 reference images, at least 10 reference images to help guide this modeling process. When you're done, just please make a zipped archive of all these reference images and upload them to the Dropbox. If you've never made a zipped archive, they're really, really, really easy to do, especially here on the Mac. I believe it's equally as easy to do on a PC, on Windows. I would place them all in a folder, kind of like I have here, right? On a Mac, and I believe on Windows, you just right-click on it. For us, it says compress. I think on a PC it says like send to zip or send to WinZip or something like that, right? But it's the exact same thing. What you get at the end of this is a zipped archive. Questions on what we're going to be doing this week for our homework in our lab? Everyone's good? Everyone understands it? All right, rock and roll. Rock and roll. We got about 15 minutes left in class. I'll let you guys use this time to start working on your lab. Good luck. May the force be with you. Go watch the new Star Wars trailers 8,000 times, as I have.